Welcome back down to Ice Level, everybody. As always, I am your host, James Blennau, coming to you with part two of the National Conference previews. This is going to be the Western half with the CCHA, Big Ten, and NCHC. So without further ado, let's get right into the interviews because we have a lot to talk about. To kick off the season for the CCHA, here we have Jared Rubado of the Bemidji Pioneer. Jared, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Not so bad myself. We're going to jump right into this with a little bit of the standout players. Who do you think we should look out for the most in the CCHA this season?
Yeah. I think the easiest way to do it is kind of look at each level through forwards, defensemen, and goaltenders, and we'll start with forwards. I love Lucas Wallen this year. I picked him as my preseason player of the year. Those will come out this coming Monday from the CCHA. I think when you look at St. Thomas as a whole and how balanced they are, he's kind of the head of that forward group. And so he's going to have good line support around him. He's going to be in a lot of spots where it'll be easier for him to rack up some points like power play, late game situations where he might get double shifted, all of those things. And you look at the success that he had last year, he had a really strong end of the year, especially when St. Thomas was getting decimated by injuries. And he really kind of didn't just push through that weird spot for St. Thomas, but he almost excelled in it. And so I think bringing him back, a veteran back to a team with a lot of expectations, really kind of sets him up to have a big year. Another one is Isaac Gordon out of Michigan Tech. Last year he was freshman of the year. And the big question is, can he keep it up without, Rylan Mosley, Kyle Kukkonen, any of the Pietalas that left from last year's team. And now the pressure's kind of on him to be the one driving his line. But I think when you look at his skill set, the speed he plays with, he has such good vision, and his hands are incredible, and he has a knack for getting in the scoring areas as a kind of an undersized player for this league. And it's really special to watch him play. So I love Isaac Gordon to have a big jump from that freshman year to that sophomore year and kind of contend for a lot of those postseason awards. And then right here in Bemidji, Jackson Jutting. He had a slow start to his fourth year last year, his senior year. He gets injured in North Dakota. He has a knee injury, tore his MCL. He was out until February, and he comes back and he's a point per game player on Bemidji's third line. That's a really big jump in the middle of a year for a kid who was getting a lot of chances but wasn't seeing a lot of results before he got injured. They found the right pairings for him on his line, and yeah, they were a third line last year, but it was really line team for Bemidji State for most of it, with some really big minutes played by their fourth line. Now with the departure of Layton Road, Carter Jones, Eric Polkamp, Kyle Loaf, there's going to need to be a big bump in scoring from that line, and that line's going to be elevated in more situations like a power play, like I said with Lucas Wallen, those late game situations. And so Jackson Jutting being that point per game person to close out Bemidji State's season for when they got super hot last year, I think that's a really safe bet to put on Jackson Jutting having a really good year. And then I kind of look at towards the defenseman, right? Chase Pietala is, I believe, the best defenseman in the CCHA. He was a stud last year. I mean, he really stepped in and looked like a senior as an underclassman, and that's really rare out of a defenseman, because I think that's where you see more of the growing pains coming in college hockey is, a defenseman having to adjust to the limited time and space that you can give forwards at that speed. But Chase Pietala looked the part last year, and another one was Evan Murrin at Minnesota State. Both of them were underclassmen, and they just looked the part. And I sound like a broken record, but when you have someone that prove it early in their hockey career at this level, it's really important, and it kind of opens up teams to do a lot with their lineup. What gives them versatility, and so you don't have to pair an underclassman with a senior, to help them carry each other's weight. You can spread the wealth a little bit, and that's what Michigan Tech and Minnesota State get to do with Chase Pietala and Evan Murr. And then if we move over to the goaltenders, truly, I believe it's a two-horse race for goaltender of the year, at least from a preseason perspective. But it's Matthias Scholl, the reigning goalie of the year from Bemidji State, and then Cole Moore, who had an outstanding freshman season last year for Bowling Green. Matthias Scholl is kind of a been there, done that guy. He's going into his fourth year as the starting goalie. Um, he did get hurt last year, and he came back, and he still won goaltender of the year, which was, I think, a little surprising to some, considering that Blake still kicking in the CCHA. And when you're a Hobie Baker candidate in 2023 and you don't win a goalie of the year in your own conference, there's some, like, can be a little head turning for some people. But that's because Matthias Scholl really earned that honor, and he was the backstop for Bemidji State when they went on their big run. But Cole Moore is an interesting one because he's a gigantic freshman, or he was last year, and but he plays like he's much smaller. And when you mix that speed and size together, it's really special. And there's not a lot of first shots that ever beat him. And Bowling Green was a team last year that went through a lot of turmoil, and then they, 2 weekends left to go in the regular season. They're still kicking there with a shot to win the league, and a lot of that was because of Cole Moore, who wasn't even named the full starter until midway through the season. So if you believe in that freshman to sophomore year jump for a lot of players, Cole Moore is one that should take another big one. So those are the players I kind of look out for when it comes to showcasing the season.
Yeah, I mean, I had the chance to watch Isaac Gordon, even in just the highlights last year. It was really unbelievable what he could do as a freshman. You talk about the defenseman, it almost reminds me of the Noah Dobson and Andy Green on the Islanders back in the day, having a veteran there with a younger defenseman. It's one of the tougher positions to adjust to in the game of hockey, so it's definitely really important for those teams to be pairing them up with either talented or experienced players.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback, I want to piggyback off that for a second too, because you don't want to totally have to sacrifice your best senior defenseman by putting him with an underclassman just to have him pull his weight. So if a freshman defenseman can not only pull their weight, but also elevate a senior to get the most out of him, or a junior, right? Like, that's so valuable to a team. And now you look at Murr and Pietila, those two kids are guys that, they're kind of those senior figures on a team as they're going to be sophomores this year. It's really impressive what they did. And so that you made a really good point by comparing them to Dobson. That's a great comparison for this league.
Yeah, moving on from sort of our known factors to a bit of a dark horses. Who are your dark horses to win the conference this year?
So the CCHA preseason polls came out yesterday, and I was shocked at how low people are on Bowling Green. And it's one of those things that it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me the more I think about it. You have Bowling Green, who did not lose a single player in the transfer portal, which is so rare for this league, right? I mean, this league gets gutted. The best players get taken out of this league, and they get thrown into the NCHC, the Big Ten, Hockey East. But the CCHA had one team that didn't lose a single transfer, and that was Bowling Green. And like I said before, talking about Cole Moore, with 2 weekends to go in the regular season, 4 games, they were in a tie for second place and 1 point out of first place. Obviously, Bowling Green, they finished 5th, in that big log jam of teams towards the top, but it was right there in front of them. And then they didn't lose anybody. They got a couple of transfers in, and they did all of this while firing and replacing their head coach. And the early returns on their new coaching staff seem very positive. And so I think when you look at Bowling Green as a team that was picked to finish 5th, I believe, in both polls, or 4th or 5th, they're kind of in the middle of the pack. I see them as a team that's going to be better than Minnesota State and Michigan Tech. They can compete with Bemidji State and St. Thomas kind of towards that upper tier of the CCHA. I don't see them as a team that's going to have to go on the road for their first round of the best of 3 in the playoffs. So, but the big question for them is finding a reliable scoring line. They didn't have a single player last year cross the 20-point threshold, and injuries were a big part of that. But you still are going to have some guys that play at or nearly most of every single game you play, and to not have a single one get more than 18 points last year is a little concerning. So if they can find a reliable scoring line, a goal or a line where if you need a goal, you put that line on the ice to go get it for you. I see this as a team that's going to compete for the CCHA and a team that could win the CCHA. As for other dark horse teams, I know a lot of guys are high on Lake State, and I can see it. They're really well coached, but they also had a lot of roster turnover. So you're asking a lot of guys to fill shoes that might not necessarily pan out right away. And so then you're looking at a team that's going to have to go on the road and win a couple of road games in the playoffs. But Lake State went on the road to St. Thomas last year and won a 3-game series and came into Bemidji State and were 1 game away from going to the Mason Cup final. So I can see the appeal there. Then Michigan Tech, Minnesota State, they're kind of right there, going to be competing for those home playoff series. And then some people believe that they can compete for the Mason Cup and the McNaughton Cup. So I'd say when you're looking at the CCHA as a whole, to me, it's pretty obvious that Bemidji State and St. Thomas are the top 2 teams. I think they're other in that category as well. But I think everybody below St. Thomas and Bemidji State, and then above Northern State or Northern Michigan and Ferris State are probably in that dark horse category. But I love Bowling Green this year. I think Bowling Green's a team that could win this league.
Yeah, it's such a competitive conference, and especially St. Thomas, being such a new program, but rising so quickly, has also given them a bit of a hindrance as they can make the NCAA tournament. So who do you think is going to go to the tournament and how many bids?
I think ideally the CCHA wants to be a 2-bid league. It's not going to be the Big Ten where it could get in 4 teams. The NCHC, hockey, it's never going to be that league. At least not for the foreseeable future. I mean, there would have to be a massive overhaul in the college hockey structure for that to happen. But in an ideal world, once the transfer portal finds the base level, once the 5th years kind of filter themselves out of college hockey, and there's a little bit more parity, I think the CCHA sees itself as a 2-bid league. That being said, this is not the year for it. The CCHA got pretty gutted in the portal. And that's just the reality of what it's going to be like some years. And the recruiting classes for every school took a hit. Obviously, Northern Michigan lost one of the best recruiting classes in the country once their head coach left. Bemidji State, they brought in a pretty solid recruiting class, but they still have to replace some really important pieces from last year. And the same goes for Minnesota State, who lost everybody, and Michigan Tech, who lost everybody. And so this year I see it as a 1-bid league. And while St. Thomas might win the CCHA, I think Bemidji State is the team that's going to go to the NCAA tournament this year, whether they win the Mason Cup or they finish as a runner-up to St. Thomas. That's really where I feel like it's gonna end up. And but that's the thing. Like, in the CCHA, when you look at where they want to be as a conference in 2, 3, 4 years, I think they would like to have 1 or 2 teams that are just right in there as teams competing for at-large bids, and then whether they end up on the outside looking in or not the NCAA tournament, but just to have some more continuity throughout the top of the league. And the CCHA is great because, like you said, there's so much parity, and they beat the hell out of each other. And it's physical hockey, and it's grinded out defensive hockey, and it's fun hockey to watch, but it's also not conducive for trying to get a bunch of teams in to represent the CCHA in the NCAA tournament. So I think at some point the CCHA is going to have a few teams pull ahead like Minnesota State used to. And that's, but that's to be determined who those teams are going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, earlier on you talked about your sort of top 2 and your bottom 2. Can we take a look at how the rest of the standings are going to shape out in your eyes?
Yeah, so I have Bemidji State 1, St. Thomas 2. I do have Bowling Green at number 3, Minnesota State 4, Michigan Tech 5, Augustana 6, Lake State 7, Northern Michigan 8, Ferris State 9. I might have accidentally flipped Minnesota State and Michigan Tech. I can't remember, but I'm pretty confident in those, and that's how I think this league is going to shake out this year. Northern Michigan was picked to finish last by the coaches yesterday in the poll, and still think there's a little bit of talent there, and they, a new coach rejuvenizes the group that they got, and they'll go on the road and win a game or two that they probably shouldn't. Whereas I think Ferris State is a team that just, they lost a lot, and I don't know what they did to really replace them. So yeah, that's how I think the CCHA shakes out.
And then, given the fact that you have replaced well, it hasn't been released, but you have submitted your media poll for the awards predictions for this season, who do you think is going to be player, freshman, and goalie of the year, as well as first team all conference?
Yeah, so player of the year, I did pick Lucas Wallen. It was between him and Jackson Jutting. I think the decision there for both teams is I'm looking at the support around them, where who has the best chance between those two and Isaac Gordon, like which of those three has the best chance to play with the most support around him, and that's Lucas Wallen. All three of them play completely different games, where Jutting is a defensive forward, Wallen is more of a great two-way, and Isaac Gordon is a shoot-first offense kind of forward, right? And so it's tough to compare the three of them, but I think Lucas Wallen is going to really have that standout year. Those are the three forwards I picked for first team. And then I mentioned the two defensemen. I picked Evan Murray and Chase Pietla, and then I did go with Matthias Scholl for goaltender of the year. And then for freshman of the year, I picked Jackson Panzer out of Bemidji State. He's a kid that committed to North Dakota when he was in 8th grade. He goes and plays for the Sioux Falls Stampede in the USHL. North Dakota wanted him to stick around and play in the USHL for one more year, and Bemidji State said, hey, why don't you come to college right now and play for us this year? And I think he's going to step in to a center role, play second, third line minutes right away. And for a team that desperately needs help on the face-off dots, he's a guy that's going to bring in and chip in along the way, and offensively too. And I think you wouldn't be surprised if he's got 20, 25 points by the end of the year. So it's a fun pick to make as for freshman of the year, is to try and find the kid that's maybe going to come out of nowhere. And because nobody picked Isaac Gordon last year, and that's really cool to see a kid just really kind of seize that opportunity. So I think Jackson Panzer is going to be that kid this year.
All right, Jared, thanks so much for coming on and helping us out previewing the season. We're going to move on to the next conference.
Thank you.
The Ice Level Podcast is sponsored by Best Damn Tape. Best Damn Tape's mission is to supply the most affordable and elite-level sports tape to athletes worldwide. You can go to bestdamntape.com and use code DanKShow40, that's DanKShow40, to get 40% off your order. Go to bestdamntape.com and order your clear tape, your black and white tape, scented stick wax, and more.
Our next conference, we move a little bit east, and we have Jacob Cheris, a reporter for the Dickinson Press and for CHN covering the Big Ten. Jacob, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. This is really exciting.
All right, let's jump right into it with the standout players. Who do you think is going to be the guys to look out for across the conference this year?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's been a lot of guys coming into the Big Ten via the transfer portal. I think the conference is going to be a lot more competitive because of these new players. But I think one player that caught my eye down the stretch last year, and I think is going to have a really good year, was Oliver Moore out of the University of Minnesota. His career, he got out to a bit of a slow start, but down the stretch, he was one of the hottest players, if not the hottest player in college hockey, and certainly the Big Ten. So with Moore, he had 15 points down the stretch. Can't remember the exact amount of games, but he finished fourth on the Gophers with he finished fourth on the Gophers in points. And he was, so Oliver Moore had 15 points in the first 8 games in the new year, and then he finished fourth. So, as we know, he's one of the fastest skaters in the nation. And he's might have a chance to, play on a line with Jimmy Snuggerud and Matthew Wood on his left. That might be one of the most dominant top lines in all of college hockey. I think another guy that you've got to look out for, this is a new incoming player, Cody Laskowski, transfers to Wisconsin after 4 years at RIT. He was tied for the RIT point scoring lead with Carter Wilkie He's a really highly skilled player. And this is a really big addition because Wisconsin had a lot of turnover via the transfer portal. They lost their leading scorer in Cruz Lucius to Arizona State, and Matthew D. St. Fel graduated. So, Laskowski, you're getting that offense that you're going to miss with D. St. Fel and Lucius. So those two really stand out to me. In terms of freshmen, I'm really high on Michael Hage. He's going into Michigan this year. Really good two-way center. I think he's probably going to be a top 2 center immediately, especially after Michigan lost a fair amount of talent. So those are the 3 guys. There's a lot of players in this conference. Like, I could name a bunch. Reese Lawback from Penn State is another guy I think flew under the radar. He was probably Penn State's best player down the stretch. I watched that team on a daily basis. Part of that, kid line with Aiden Fink and Matt DeMarsico. So yeah, there's a lot of players, but those are the 4 that I'm looking at, and they're going to have really big years.
You talk about Wisconsin and Mike Hastings, the team that he's assembling over there in his second season. It could really be a team to make a lot of noise. And speaking of teams making a lot of noise, who would you say are your dark horses to win the conference?
Oh, well, to win the conference, so that's a little different than what I had put when you sent me this, because my dark horse team, because I think they're going to they could surprise some people. I don't know if they'll be in contention for, the Big Ten. I don't think they'll win the Big Ten, but I think Penn State, has a chance to surprise a lot of people. They're going to be hungry after a disappointing season, but, that was expected. They lost 4 of their top leading scorers after being 1 goal shy of the Frozen Four. And this year they have a really big class coming in with a lot of hype, 10 players, or 11 players in general, but one of them was like a goalie who was in the club system, or, you know what I mean? So, Guy Gadowski had talked about after their loss against Minnesota that it was one of very few times where they felt that they were Penn State hockey, which is that that fast offensive style that they've known for. Pucks on net, that's never going to change, but they didn't have that offensive depth. And when you don't have the offensive depth and you're Penn State, they're not going to play well. This year, I think they're going to be a lot better up front because of the players that they're bringing in. But I don't know if they're going to, win the Big Ten per se, because I think they're really young. But you know what? I think I mentioned Oliver Moore. I think Minnesota, I think that, the favorites are going to be Wisconsin, Michigan State. But I really think Minnesota has the chance to win the conference because of their forward core, and also their back end. They didn't lose a lot of players, Their captain, Mike Kester, he's coming back for a 5th year, which is massive for them. I think he was one of their shot blocking leaders. Sam Renzel's a really good piece. Ryan Chesley's going to get better on their back end. One question with Minnesota, and this is going to make or break their season, is their goaltending. Obviously, we know Justin Close is no longer there. So they're really high on, he's going to be a sophomore this year and probably the number 1. Nathan Airy, he only got 3 games of college experience last year. It's tough to tell whether, he was, 1-1-0. I think he had a, 8-something save percentage, so numbers may not add up, but, it's hard to tell whether it was the team or him struggling. But now he's going to be the number 1. Bob Motzko and company are really high on him. And his backup is going to be Liam Souliere, who comes in after a down year at Penn State. So if Nathan Airy can't perform to his potential, it's going to be a long season for the Gophers. But I don't think that will be that much of an issue because of how good the Gophers are defensively. So I think Penn State is a wild card. Like I mentioned, they can really finish anywhere. I think to answer your question about dark horses to win the Big Ten, I would probably say Minnesota.
All right, yeah, you talk about Souls. I've had the chance to watch him at Penn State recently, and I've also had the chance to watch Gads' team just in person.
Yeah.
getting those pucks on that is
And
absolutely.
you will this year. You will this year
There's always a ton of youth. There's always so much speed on that team. So we'll see how they end up turning out. And with the dark horses to win the conference comes, of course, the auto bid to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
How many teams do you think this conference is going to send this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be at least 4, maybe 5. Michigan State, they're going to be a lock. Wisconsin, I think is going to be a lock. Minnesota is going to be a lock. Michigan, they're maybe, you could say people doubted them last year on paper. They took a step back. That people were saying that they were going to take a step back. Made it to their 3rd straight Frozen Four. It's Michigan. They're going to be in. They're going to be good. Brandon Nerald is a great coach. So the 5th, we'll get the standings predictions a little later. I mentioned, Penn State as a dark horse. I think they could they're a bubble team to me, as well as Ohio State. Obviously, as we both know, Ohio State did not have a good year last year, but they heated up at the right time and they upset Wisconsin in the first round of the Big Ten tournament. So I think 5 I would say 4 locks, and then 2 bubble teams for me. I think if I were to choose out of the 2 remaining teams that I didn't talk, or the 3 remaining teams that I didn't talk about, it's going to be tight. I would probably give the edge to Penn State, just because I like their offense a lot better than Ohio State's. So yeah, I think they're going to be 4 locks and 2 bubble teams.
All right, awesome. And then to wrap things up, what are your predictions for how the conference standings are going to shape up? It's different from most of these conferences. They're only 7 teams, so it could be a lot tighter, and I think the audience could really use that sort of insight. Yeah.
Well, you know what? My predictions, haven't always been right, but, that's like that with, I feel like a lot of people, especially in the Big Ten, it's so unpredictable. It's really taken a big step. So I have Wisconsin first. It's not to say, I'll get into Michigan State in a bit, but it's going to be a very tight race between Wisconsin and Michigan State. And the reason I have Wisconsin is, just to maybe play a little bit of devil's advocate, just saying, okay, maybe Wisconsin will win a big game that Michigan State won't, or vice versa. But Tommy Scarfoni comes in. He's the new number 1 goaltender for the Badgers. And I've watched him at RIT, and RIT is obviously one of the better teams in a weak Atlantic Hockey Conference. But he has always been terrific. He was a goaltender of the year last year, and he could carry them. Wisconsin already has a really good team. He could carry them to the Big Ten tournament or to the Big Ten championship. And especially because Wisconsin's going to be a lot hungrier this year because of those failed postseason expectations. They lose in 3 games to an Ohio State team they probably should have crushed, and then they fall in the first round to Quinnipiac in the regionals. So I think they're going to be hungry. Mike Hastings, great coach, but Thomas Scarfoni for me is going to be the difference. Michigan State, I have at 2. Again, it's really going to be neck and neck. I really think Michigan State can go back to back because they're that good. I know they lost Artem Levchinov, but you know what? They have a really good incoming freshman who, he was a very late addition to the recruiting class, Vladislav Lukashevich. I hope I said that name right. He's a big puck-moving defenseman too. And, of course, a lot of teams, I think 5 out of 7 Big Ten teams, they have different goaltenders. But Trey Augustine, he's going to be very good for the Spartans. Their offense is really good. And especially if Adam Nightingale can get Charlie Stramel to find his game again, because he had 2 underwhelming seasons at Wisconsin, they're going to be even better. But again, I think Michigan State can very much be in contention to go back to back. I have the Minnesota Golden Gophers at number 3 because of, like I mentioned, I love their forward core. They're very deep there, and especially their back end. They're really deep on the back end. Like I said, goaltending is going to make or break their season. Same thing with Michigan. Michigan probably has the most questions surrounding their goaltending. Jake Parcheski's gone. Now in comes Logan Stein, who comes in from Ferris State. They kind of had a one-for-one trade because, Noah West, who was their backup, he went to Ferris State. Stein comes in from Ferris State to Michigan. Hard to say whether or not he didn't perform well because Ferris State was one of the worst teams in the country. But that's really the question with them is, if Stein can't get going, Michigan might, they might be a lot lower in the standings, but I can never count out the Michigan Wolverines. Because, Bartcheski, yeah, he had his ups and downs at Canisius, but he was always very good in watching him. Penn State I have at number 5. I really struggled with picking whether it was going to be Ohio State or Penn State at 5. But like I said, I don't think they're going to... I think Penn State with their incoming class, they've got some really special players there. Charlie Serrato I've been really high on since he flipped from Michigan to Penn State. Andrew Kuzma was a great flip from Maine. I think Arseny Sergeyev, who's their new goaltender, he's coming in from 2 years at UConn. If he's very consistent, they're going to be in good shape there, and I think he will be. Defense is obviously a big question, but I think as long as Penn State's offense is gelling and going and they're getting that production that they didn't get last year, they're going to be really good. I have Ohio State at 6 because of the fact of how well they played down the stretch. Their defense, really, that was the big thing that stood out to me. They shut down Wisconsin in the first round. They played so well defensively down the stretch. They played spoiler. And I think it's going to carry over. And their offense got a lot better too. Gunnar Wolfontaine and Riley Thompson coming in from the portal. They have Noah Powell, who's he has a really high ceiling as a freshman. He's going to be really, really good. So I have Ohio State at 6, and I think Logan Turnus is going to be more consistent as their goaltender. And Notre Dame I have at 7. Look, Notre Dame is, I've always been told you can never count them out. They always play well down the stretch, but they don't have Ryan Bishel anymore. Owen Say is going to come in from Mercyhurst. Atlantic hockey goaltenders, especially with Mercyhurst being at the bottom of the conference, it might be tough. They have a good freshman in Nick Kemp, but unless your name is Trey Augustine or Jacob Fowler, it's hard to be a true freshman number 1 goalie in the Big Ten, or just in college hockey in general. So if Say can't perform, it's going to be up to Kemp. I don't know how well that's going to gel over. Notre Dame, they're going to, even though I have them last, they're going to be, in my opinion, they're going to be more competitive than Ohio State was last year in dead last. They didn't get a conference win until, what was it? I think January or something along those lines. So I have Notre Dame at 7. I think their offense is just not going to be enough. It wasn't enough last year. They lost some key pieces to the defense. So, wouldn't surprise me if maybe they get 6, but I think they're going to be at the basement.
Yeah, there's only so much that the Islanders draft pick Danny Nelson can do for the Irish team. And you are forgetting one true freshman successful goalie. My guy, Yaniv Peretz, a couple of years ago.
Oh, he was a freshman. Oh, I actually
He started out as a freshman.
I actually didn't know that. When I know he left 2 years ago. What year was he? Was he a senior?
I think he was a sophomore when he left.
Wow. Okay. I actually didn't know that. But still, it's hard to be a true freshman goalie in in college hockey. Trey Augustine, he had success at the international level. We knew he was going to be very good. Jacob Fowler, we knew he was going to be very good because of his track record in the USHL. He's just always known to win.
Yeah, Spencer Knight in the past.
Exactly. So that's really why I have them dead last. You'll see, I'm writing about this for College Hockey News. So overall, I'm really excited. I'm really excited to get the season going. You know what? It's going to be fun playing Penn State, playing Quinnipiac non-conference. I'm excited for you to see that series.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we sign off, if you want to rattle off just real quickly your first team all-conference rookie player and goalie of the year.
Oh gosh, I actually wrote this down. When I was bored the other day. So you think freshman of the year and player of the year?
Freshman, player, goalie, and then all-conference.
All right. So freshman, again, there's a lot of good freshmen there. I'm gonna say Hage. He's gonna be really, really good. I guess I love his game. I love his two-way game. He's great offensively. I think Michael Hage is gonna be in there. Charlie Serrato as well. Player of the year. I mean, it's tough to bet against Jimmy Snuggerud coming back. It's really, really tough to bet against him because he's so good. I know it's maybe not the flashiest pick, but it's just tough to bet him. His shot is unreal, so I'm gonna go with him. Goalie, I'm gonna go with. You know what? I think Trey Augustine comes through. He's gonna be hungry after losing to Kyle McClellan. Tommy Scarponi's definitely going to be a finalist. I don't think there's any question about that. And first team All Big Ten, I guess, right? So I think probably Snuggerud, Aiden Fink, Cody Laskowski, Tim Lavelle. Tim Lavelle was another talking about Michigan's blue line. I love that addition from Arizona State. I actually didn't get to finish this list. So I guess my other defenseman will be, let's say, Ryan Chesley. Why not? Ryan Chesley. I'm a Capitals fan. He'll have a big year. And then goalie, I think, is going to be probably Trey Augustine again.
All right. That's all I got. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really enjoy it.
All right. On to the NCHC. All right. I'm here with Avash Kalra from College Hockey News, our NCHC insider. Avash, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get right into it. Who are your standout players for the NCHC this season?
Yeah. So first of all, I think that the NCHC is sort of primed to have another really exciting year. Obviously, the reigning national champions are a member of the league in terms of Denver, and I guess I'll start there. Zeev Buyem is probably going to be one of the big standout players to highlight for the league. He's a sophomore now. He was drafted in the first round in the NHL draft this past summer by the Minnesota Wild, and he's going to be given a little bit of an opportunity to come out of the shadow, if we could call it that, of his brother. Now that Shai Buyem is signed with the Red Wings, now obviously Zeev and Shai played together last year. And actually, it was the really first time in a long time that they've been on the same team. So Zeev is used to playing on his own. He's a defenseman, and I was actually at Magnus Arena here in Denver just earlier this week and watched a little bit of their practice. And he already looks a little bit bigger and stronger than he was last year. And sticking with Denver, another player I guess worth highlighting would be Matt Davis. They're a goaltender. He kind of came not really out of nowhere for those who know the program, but out of nowhere really for people following from the outside, I think, last year, especially in the Frozen Four. He had that save in the national championship game on BC's Ryan Leonard, just a spectacular save, probably one of the greatest plays in the history of the Frozen Four, and was the most outstanding player for the tournament as well. So he's back as the goalie. He's a senior. He was actually part of the Colorado Avalanche development camp over the summer, so got a little bit of experience playing with other players and within a professional organization. So certainly someone to watch. And I guess staying with goaltending, Colorado College, Caden Mbarico was the sort of goaltender of the year last year and was kind of named to the preseason NCHC all NCHC team, and certainly is another player to watch. He's a junior. He's undrafted actually as well, and should be a lot of strong goaltending here in the Rocky Mountain region. So there's several certainly good players and strong players throughout the league. The other one that I did want to just quickly mention is, North Dakota has had kind of this revolving goaltending situation over the last few years in terms of bringing in transfers from elsewhere, and they're bringing in a transfer goaltender from Arizona State. So TJ Semptimpelter, who is the goaltender at Arizona State. And of course, Arizona State is joining the NCHC this year as well. So those are just a few players to highlight, but really a strong league with some star talent throughout the conference.
Yeah, a lot of star talent and a lot of great teams that can pull off the upset. Who do you think your dark horses to win the conference this year are?
Yeah, so I as part of the NCHC media certainly submitted my preseason ballot, and I'll share that I had Denver at the top and then North Dakota second. And it's hard to pick against those two teams. Now, certainly neither of those is a dark horse. They are teams that are expected to do well. Obviously, Denver is the reigning national champs, bringing back a lot of the talent that they had last year. And of course, North Dakota expected to be strong with lots of returning players. One to highlight would be Jake Livanavich he's a defenseman, just like Zeev Buyam. He's also named to the All NCHC preseason team. He's really, really an impressive player. Beyond that, though, they're actually bringing in 8 freshmen, I believe. And so a lot of including 2 first-round picks from this past summer. And so a lot of those players are going to step in and likely lead North Dakota certainly to a top 4 finish, one would imagine, but challenging for the league title. I think that in terms of a dark horse, the dark horse is clearly Arizona State. I mean, they're obviously the new team to the league, but they're not like a brand new team to college hockey. It's not like some other instances throughout the nation of teams joining a conference for the first time. Arizona State is an established program at this point. They've been to the NCAAs. They won 24 games last year. They beat Denver last year. They beat Providence. They tied Cornell. They have a great coach in Greg Powers, who's been with them this whole time from their club years through Division I. They became Division I in 2015. And then they have a lot of strong players. In fact, they brought in a lot of players from outside. And some of those that I'll highlight are so a couple of defensemen. First of all, Noah Beck is one of those. He played 124 games at Clarkson, and now he's going to be a graduate transfer to Arizona State. Artem Schlein, he's a Russian defenseman. He also played 124 games at other programs at UConn and Northern Michigan. He scored over 80 points in those 2 programs. Cruz Lucius, he was almost a point per game player at Wisconsin the past 2 years. And then they also returned their leading scorer from last year, Lucas Sillinger. He had 48 points. And so you add all of those ingredients together, it wouldn't not be a surprise at all for Arizona State to challenge for one of those top positions in the league. I'll say that winning the league might be a long shot. I'm not sure I would, bet money on that, but they're going to challenge for a top spot just with all the talent that they have coming back.
Yeah, there's a lot of great teams. You talk about that NCAA tournament experience. Do you think they're going back, and who do you think is going from the conference to the NCAA tournament this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Arizona State certainly is a team that has the pieces, the coaching, the players, the experience, like I said, to go back. I think that the NCHC in the last few years has had, usually 4 or 5 teams in the NCAAs. So I would expect Denver. I would expect North Dakota. I think that after those 2, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I think beyond just the possibility of Arizona State, I think a couple of teams that I would look to at making the NCAAs this year would be Colorado College. I think they're ready to take the next step. They just missed the NCAAs last year. They were the last team out. I think with Mbarico returning, Noah Laba returning, he's a New York Rangers draft pick. He one of their top scorers and a really strong kind of power forward. And then Omaha as well. They were actually one of the hottest teams the second half of the year last year, thanks to their defense and goaltending. And they also bring back a lot. So I would highlight those teams: Denver, North Dakota, Colorado College, Omaha, and then maybe Arizona State, as teams that I would anticipate may make the NCAAs. I think the wild cards would be Western Michigan and Minnesota Duluth. They've kind of taken a little bit of a step back the last couple of years in terms of their record compared to previously, but they both have two of the strongest freshman classes in the nation, I would say. And if those players can jump in and contribute and fit within their systems, those teams could be in the mix as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about submitting your media poll earlier in this conversation. What is your full standings prediction for the conference this year?
Okay, so I'll say this knowing that I'm almost certain to be wrong in many of these spots, and that's okay, obviously. But I put Denver at number 1. I had North Dakota at 2. I had Colorado College at 3. And then Omaha at 4. And then following that, St. Cloud State at 5. I put Arizona State at 6, although, again, I think that they could be anywhere from, you really finish anywhere in the conference and potentially in the top half, as I said before. Just because of the wild card with the freshmen, as I mentioned, I'm putting Western Michigan at 7 and Minnesota Duluth at 8. And then I'm putting Miami in last place at 9, which unfortunately for them is a position they've kind of grown accustomed to the last few years. A really proud program that made another coaching change in the offseason. So we'll see. They've really struggled the last few years, but I think everybody's hoping that they return to, the kind of level they were at 10, 15 years ago when they were a perennial NCAA team.
Yeah, absolutely. Losing a guy like Red Savage a couple of years ago is really going to do some damage to the program.
Sure.
But in terms of the star players, what are your conference awards predictions?
So in terms of awards predictions, I'm going with Zeev Buium as the player of the year, Denver defenseman. I think that he is not only probably the strongest offensive defenseman in the league, but really, and we saw this in their national championship run, improved tremendously defensively. I mentioned the strength. I mentioned that he was drafted by the Minnesota Wild in the first round. I think that confidence is going to really boost him. I think coming back as a sophomore, as the defending champ, he is going to be, hard to deal with in terms of opposing teams. And so I'm going with Zeev Buium, recognizing that there are several potential candidates throughout the league. In terms of Rookie of the Year, so I mentioned earlier that North Dakota is bringing in a couple of first-round picks, and I'm going to pick one of them, actually, to be the Rookie of the Year, Sasha Boisvert. It's spelled Boivert, but pronounced Boisvert. He was drafted by the Chicago Blackhawks. He's one of 5 freshman draft picks on North Dakota, and so I think that he is a really strong forward. He's going to be, be able to step right into a top 6 role. He'll produce for an offense that tends to click, and those things are sort of key features that lead to winning awards. Being able to play a lot of minutes and produce a lot of points, and so that's why I'm going with him. So those would be my Player of the Year and Rookie of the Year going into this coming season.
All right, that's about it. Avash, thanks so much for coming on.
No problem, James. Happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
All right, let's wrap it up. That's it for today's episode. A massive thank you to Jared Rubado, Jacob Cheris, and Avash Kalra for coming on and helping me preview. They were all very gracious guests and provided us with a lot of great information. As always, I'm not an expert, but I've been James Blennau, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.